Bien, nous allons parler cet après-midi de la dimension émergente de l'Afrique, puisqu'on a parlé beaucoup de croissance pendant ces 2 jours, mais nous allons parler de l'Afrique de manière complémentaire par rapport à ce que nous avons discuté jusqu'à présent, pour nous intéresser dans une Afrique émergente, à des nouveaux types de groupes et d'entreprises qui se développent à l'échelle africaine, et de très nombreuses études faites par différents cabinets, tous des grands à l'échelle mondiale, nous ont appris que nous étions riches au moins de quelques lions qui commençaient à rugir dans les différentes économies. Et ces lions ne sont rien d'autre que des groupes d'une certaine taille qui commencent déjà à devenir multinationaux à l'échelle de régions africaines ou multinationaux à l'échelle du monde, donc des groupes globaux. J'aimerais commencer par échanger avec vous sur ces 2 sujets, comment vous voyez le développement des économies et de groupes d'une certaine taille dans nos différentes régions, mais je voudrais aussi que nous échangions sur ce qu'il faudrait que nous développions de manière supplémentaire pour continuer à attirer plus d'investisseurs dans nos régions, dans nos pays, et qu'est-ce qu'on pourrait offrir à ces investisseurs dans les prochaines années. Je vais commencer par vous, Monsieur le Ministre, si vous le voulez bien.
Merci beaucoup. Merci à vous tous. En effet, pour rentrer dans le vif du sujet, vous avez parlé de ces lions en Afrique, mais il y a aussi des lionceaux, si je peux me permettre l'expression. Donc des économies qui n'ont pas forcément atteint un certain niveau, un niveau critique en tout cas, mais qui se développent très bien et qui poussent surtout des entreprises à je dirais, s'africaniser, si on peut se le permettre. Et pour parler spécifiquement de mon pays, le Mali, qui sort d'une crise, mais dont les soubassements de l'économie ont pu quand même résister à cela, nous avons des groupes qui s'internationalisent dans la sous-région, justement. Vous savez, le Mali est membre de l'Union économique et monétaire ouest-africaine, qui est une union qui rassemble plusieurs pays, 8 pays de la sous-région, et qui partagent la même monnaie, donc avec des conventions régionales. Donc, effectivement, des économies qui émergent, je vous ai parlé des lions, mais également des lionceaux. On a, par exemple, au Mali, l'un des plus grands groupes hôteliers africains, détenus par des Africains, qui s'exportent à l'étranger, qui est le groupe Azalaï, mais également des entreprises, des meuniers, qui s'exportent dans la sous-région. L'objectif derrière de ces groupes-là, c'est d'aller acquérir de nouveaux marchés. Vous savez, le commerce transafricain est tellement faible qu'aujourd'hui, qu'il est important que nous puissions, en tout cas, la développer et la vulgariser, et qu'elle soit puisse beaucoup plus profiter, en tout cas, aux populations qui sont servies. Parce que nous nous rendons compte que à force d'importation hors du continent, on ne développe pas vraiment nos économies. Et bien entendu, la problématique du financement de ces entreprises-là est posée, et les banques, malgré donc les contraintes qu'elles ont en termes réglementaires, il y a quand même des initiatives qui sont prises pour permettre à ces entreprises-là de sortir et de financer la vraie économie, je dirais plutôt, parce que nous avons beaucoup d'investissements qui rentrent dans nos pays, et souvent il faut qu'elles soient inclusives et qu'elles puissent permettre vraiment de servir de l'économie réelle, c'est-à-dire accélérer l'industrialisation de nos pays à travers des mesures qui sont incitatives, qui permettent d'une part d'abord d'aller vers une amélioration du climat des affaires dans nos pays, donc les réglementations qui régissent donc le commerce et l'économie de façon générale, pour permettre à ces entreprises-là, bien entendu, de s'exporter et de créer ces économies émergentes dont vous parlez en Afrique. Et tant que nous ne passons pas par ce processus-là, on n'arrivera jamais, en tout cas, à atteindre les niveaux de développement qu'on s'est fixés. Voilà.
Alors, cela m'inspire 2 sujets, si vous le voulez bien. D'un côté, est-ce que, chez vous, ma question va être directe, mais elle a l'intérêt de vous faire réagir, est-ce qu'on a les entrepreneurs qui ont cette vision régionale, multirégionale, et est-ce que vous pouvez dire quels sont les secteurs dans lesquels on peut imaginer ces lionceaux grandir et devenir des lions?
Alors chez nous au Mali, ça a déjà en fait entamé. Vous savez, j'ai eu le bonheur de rencontrer, de voir dans la salle M. Paul Deremo, qui est celui qui a créé le groupe Bank of Africa au Mali. C'était en 1982 et qui est, depuis début des années 90, a commencé à exporter cette banque-là hors des frontières maliennes. Ensuite a suivi un groupe hôtelier qui s'appelle le groupe Azalaï, qui aujourd'hui est dans la sous-région et qui est en train d'avoir de l'appétit pour l'Afrique de l'Est, Alors vous voyez à quel point c'est quand même loin de son pays d'origine. Et également, il y a des meuniers comme le groupe Oud Babi, qui est aussi un meunier qui a déjà une unité au Mali, mais en train de développer des unités dans les pays de la sous-région. Donc oui, en effet, il y a des entreprises qui s'exportent. Il y a le groupe CIRA, qui est par exemple un groupe d'ingénieurs conseils, qui est présent dans plus de 15 pays en Afrique. Donc, à ce niveau-là, ces entreprises...
Ça veut dire que je dois comprendre chez vous que dans les activités de services à valeur ajoutée, nous pouvons imaginer qu'il y a un développement potentiel, mais aussi dans l'industrie?
Dans l'industrie aussi. Dans l'industrie, il y a un fort potentiel. Il est vrai que nous avons encore à travailler sur certaines contraintes que rencontrent les industries, comme dans la plupart des pays de façon générale, mais cependant, on est en train d'accélérer. Donc aujourd'hui, à défaut d'avoir... Souvent, nous avons des entreprises qui sont moyennes au Mali, mais qui sont très grosses hors de nos frontières. Et ça fait une fierté aussi.
Monsieur Ben Barka, vous avez en charge l'industrie et la promotion de l'investissement du Mali. Quels seraient les 2 ou 3 messages clés que vous auriez envie de partager avec nous? Parce qu'on a besoin d'investissements croisés, on a besoin de travailler. Alors, a fortiori, quand on est dans une dynamique sud-sud, pourquoi faut-il aujourd'hui aller chercher la croissance que tout le monde essaie de décrypter dans le monde? Et pourquoi faut-il aller investir chez vous?
Pourquoi investir chez nous?
Au-delà de la crise conjoncturelle qu'a connue le Mali, parce que l'histoire du Mali est tellement forte et profonde que je ne souhaiterais pas que nous attardions à la conjoncture, mais aux vrais agrégats.
Je pense qu'aujourd'hui, nous sortons, effectivement, vous l'avez bien dit, nous sortons d'une crise, mais une sortie qui nous permet de repartir à zéro, sur de nouvelles bases. Et quand on sort d'une crise comme ça, quand les institutions de la République sont renforcées à travers les élections que nous avons eues et la vision du président de la République, on peut dire qu'il y a espoir, qu'on a des potentialités, on a des atouts. Cela veut dire quoi? Il y a un travail quand même préalable qui avait été fait, ça il faut le reconnaître. Et je pense qu'aujourd'hui, pour attirer, vous savez, je dis toujours, attirer des investisseurs, c'est la chose pour moi là, qui est la plus facile. Vous avez une bonne campagne de communication, vous avez de beaux slides, de belles vidéos. L'investisseur, il prend son luxe, ça lui coûte un billet d'avion, il va passer une nuit à l'hôtel de nuit. Le plus important, c'est de retenir l'investisseur. Et cela demande de travailler sur le climat des affaires de façon générale. Et pas seulement ce qu'on voit, le Doing Business, qui est un indicateur qui est excellent. Cependant, il y a d'autres réformes qui sont menées. Et ça permet donc de retenir les investisseurs. Donc les potentialités au niveau du Mali, nous les avons à plusieurs niveaux. L'agriculture. Et nous venons de participer au salon au SIAM 2014 à Meknes. On a vu à quel point le plan Maroc vert a transformé complètement les agrégats économiques au Maroc et l'adhésion des populations à tous les niveaux, toutes classes sociales confondues, adhèrent à ce type de programme-là, tant et aussi longtemps que nous serons en mesure aujourd'hui de répondre, de remettre les gens, de renforcer, je dirais, la dignité des populations. Je pense qu'à ce niveau-là, tout est possible. Et c'est ce sur quoi nous travaillons actuellement. C'est la vision que nous avons et l'agriculture et la transformation de cette agriculture en produit fini ou semi-fini est vraiment aujourd'hui les objectifs que nous nous sommes fixés.
Merci beaucoup. Je voudrais aller vers vous, Caroline Kariuki. Vous êtes CEO du Kenya Private Sector Alliance, en charge du développement des activités de l'association des entrepreneurs, du patronat kényan. Et vous passez beaucoup de temps à porter la bonne parole sur l'intérêt d'aller au Kenya et l'intérêt de commercer, de développer, d'investir dans votre pays. Puisque vous avez l'occasion d'aller comprendre ce qui se passe dans d'autres régions, j'aimerais vous demander comment vous regardez l'émergence de l'Afrique aujourd'hui.
Thank you very much. I'll start with some facts because when you talk about Africa and we talk about the emerging Africa and the emerging lions, I think it's good to realize that it's a reality because at times we may talk about something and think that people are creating stories. We've read from The Economist early in the 2000s when they talked about Africa as a basket case. And now The Economist, the last stories they've been writing is about Africa rising. And there are reasons to why Africa is rising. But just allow me to go through a few facts of what's changing in Africa and what's making those changes. When you look at the secondary enrollment in most African countries, between just 2000 and 2008, it has increased by 48%. And that really changes the literacy level. with Africa joining most of the country of the world in terms of literacy. Over the last decade, malaria and HIV, malaria has decreased by 30%, and HIV and AIDS by up to 74% in most of the worst affected countries. The life expectancy across Africa has increased by about 10%, and child mortality is decreasing steadily. The real income per person has increased by more than 30%, and Africa is the world's fastest growing continent at the moment, with a GDP of on average of 6% a year. The FDI has gone from $15 billion in 2002 to $37 billion in 2006 and 46 billion in 2012. Those are just a few facts of what's changing in Africa. It has a fast-growing middle class, and everyone who travels around Africa can see this as you look at the consumption, at the real estate, and all the goods. That were many goods and services that were not, that were scarce, that were imported from around the world, and you could hardly find them in the supermarkets. Now they're widely used. Look at the telephones and the mobile telephony, especially because, and part of that was a blessing in disguise. With poor infrastructure for landlines, that is what has grown the mobile telephone in Africa. And every 3 phones, in Africa you find three mobile phones for every 4 people, the same as India, something that is very different when you go to Western Europe and the US. By 2017, nearly 30% of households are expected to have a television set, and an almost 5-fold increase every 10 years. This is just what's happening in Africa in terms of consumption. Let me talk about Kenya. What's driving Kenya? When we talk about some of the African lions, and there are many of the African lions, the Minister of Mali has talked about the lions and the cubs, because there are those that are already lions and there are those that are cubs that are catching up. But Kenya is one of the lions in the sense that it's the 4th largest economy in Africa and the 2nd largest non-resource economy in Africa after Egypt. Kenya GDP was about $17.39 billion in 2004, and per capita GDP averaged more than $450 annually, US dollars. Adjusted in purchasing power parity terms, per capita GDP was approximately $1,200. And you can look at that 10 years ago, and it was not even a half of that. The country GDP growth on average is about 4% each year. Kenya's economy is evidenced by an annual real GDP growth of about 4.6 in 2012, as compared to 4.4% in 2011 and 5.8% in 2010. So the average growth is about 4.65%. But what's Kenya's story? How did this come to how did it get to there? One of the main contributors is agriculture sector, which contributes 24% of the GDP, and followed by manufacturing, accounting for 13% of the GDP, and tourism, 12%. It's a market-based liberalized economy, which is fully integrated in the global market through multilateral, bilateral trade agreements, and participates in WTO, has a very vibrant, active, and dynamic private sector, contributing over 80% of the GDP. And what I tell every investor when they come to Kenya, don't read the news. What the private sector, in spite of the politics in the country or outside the country, do not affect the private sector. And the private sector has learned to be resilient and to work outside the political. When they are not being favorable, the private sector has remained the engine of economic growth. What makes Kenya an investment destination and makes it one of the lions of Africa? One, its strategic position and access to markets. When you look at the map of Africa and where Kenya is placed at the east coast of Africa, in every direction to the corner of Africa, it's a maximum of 5 hours flight, which means if you locate your business in Kenya, then you can access the rest of Africa pretty easy. The Kenya Airways, which is a national carrier, accesses almost 50 of those countries. We are hoping by the end of this year, we'll be coming to Morocco directly, and so be able to access this market. Excellent connectivity to major worldwide hubs and time zones because of where we are located. We always look at ourselves at anyone coming through the Indian Ocean from the Far East and Australia then your entrance is through Kenya. That makes us very, very comparative in terms of where to locate your business. A deep pool of educated and skilled manpower. 80% of Kenyans are literate and has one of the most literate and most skilled manpower in Africa. And no wonder a lot of multinationals, when they think about the East Coast, the Central African, they locate their businesses in Kenya. It has an enabling economic policy framework, which is fully liberalized, and work very closely with the private sector. I represent Kenya Private Sector Alliance, an umbrella body of the business in Kenya, and that brings together about 80 associations and over 200 corporates, reaching over 100,000 companies that operate in Kenya and in the neighboring countries, and work very, very closely with government in terms of pro-growth policies. It has a potential for exploration and exploitation of mineral resources. We finally recently discovered oil and gas, and are learning from our counterparts in Africa, and especially Nigeria and others that have gone that route, so that we may not make some of the mistakes some of the countries have made. We are one of the world's largest producing rare earth minerals, and again, that is going to change the economy of the country. We have relatively developed physical infrastructure, and a lot of work is going through there, and working with a lot of partners around the world, and especially the Chinese. And we also have a lot of good social amenities and quality of life. And I'll stop there, and maybe we'll get into all the other opportunities that are available in Kenya. But those are a few facts that tell the story of Africa and why it's really the emerging market, or really where we talk about the lions of Africa today.
Merci beaucoup, Caroline, pour ces explications. J'aimerais profiter de votre expérience, puisque vous allez régulièrement défendre l'intérêt, avec tout l'argumentaire que vous venez de partager avec nous, l'intérêt d'investir en Afrique et d'investir particulièrement au Kenya. Qu'est-ce qui a pu améliorer, selon vous, de manière claire, l'environnement des affaires pour les investisseurs, qu'ils soient nationaux ou internationaux, ces dernières années? Quels sont les succès dans l'amélioration de l'environnement des affaires?
Okay. Some of the things that have changed the business environment, one is a close partnership with government. That's to ensure that government is understanding the issues, the bottlenecks that affect business. Second is a pro-private sector government, especially in the last 10 years. Before that, we saw a lot of businesses fleeing the environment because the government then, for 24 years, wasn't as friendly. But also it's the economic policy reforms, the capital markets, the financial markets, the mobile markets, that now that we have mobile money, something that started in a different country, but now has grown and found its root in Kenya. There are some of those that are what is changing, attracting some of the businesses that are leaving, especially manufacturing jobs that are leaving Asia as Asian countries grow and become more sophisticated. And some of those jobs, they're coming to Africa. And so attracting those kind of jobs, moving away from just traditional agriculture to agribusiness. That was also led to a lot of encouragement to private sector investments. ICT has been a key driver of our business because we are really an ICT hub for East Africa and majority of Africa. A lot of the applications, a lot of ICT development has happened in Kenya, and that has really driven business. A lot of development, connectivity within the region, but more so the East African community. The Common Market Protocol, the Common Market Protocol, the Customs Union, a lot of that, opening up the borders, that not just the East African community, but all the way COMESA, all the way from Egypt, or down to the south, that has given the investors confidence that they have a bigger market, not only looking at the 41...
What is the size of this market? How many consumers for the middle class?
For the middle class?
Yes. For this whole market, this is the regional market.
I don't have the numbers for the middle class, but the number for when before you looked at Kenya alone, you only had a reach of 41.3 million Kenyans. Mm-hmm. But now for East Africa alone, it's 400 million. For the COMESA region is more than that. It's almost double that number. So that gives the market, the investors more confidence in terms of your reach is not just the Kenyan market, neither is it only the East African market, but the whole COMESA region. And now there's a lot of discussion of bringing together not only the COMESA region, but also the SADC region, so including South Africa and others. And there's a lot of discussion that is going around there. That also is very encouraging for business.
Thank you for sharing with us all this experience and to explain to us how does it work. But would you want, please, to tell us what doesn't work and what we have to do together?
Okay, some of the things that don't work, we still have a lot of them are, apart from trade barriers, the tariff barriers, is non-trade barriers. Just the trade logistics, they're still a challenge, but they're an opportunity of growth. The second thing that hasn't worked very well, and it's not just for the region, it's the whole interconnectivity with Africa. Whenever you look at the West European intra-trade is about 60%. The North America intra-trade is about 40%. Africa intra-trade is about 10%. So I don't see it more as a challenge right now. I see it as an opportunity.
Monsieur le ministre veut réagir sur ces échanges, parce que c'est vrai que lorsqu'on compare à la tradition européenne, lorsqu'on compare à la tradition nord-américaine, le niveau d'échange entre les pays est énorme par rapport à ce qu'on peut voir à l'échelle régionale. Alors, le Mali fait partie de l'Union économique et on le voit bien. Est-ce que l'échange à l'échelle régionale peut favoriser plus de business et plus de développement? Et qu'est-ce qu'on pourrait faire pour l'améliorer? Voilà, il marche.
Merci. Non, je pense qu'elle a parfaitement raison. Il parle de 10%. Je pense que dans la sous-région ouest-africaine, on est à moins de 10%. Et les raisons pour lesquelles aujourd'hui, au Mali, nous poussons notre secteur privé à aller chercher des opportunités, non pas en Europe, aux États-Unis, mais bien dans la sous-région, dans les pays qui sont frontaliers. Donc, on a des industries qui sortent déjà. Mais il faut que ce commerce-là soit vraiment le vecteur aujourd'hui qui va nous permettre à nous, en tout cas, de croître. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, c'est des marchés qui sont en face. Le Mali, c'est 15 millions d'habitants, mais dans des zones économiques et monétaires, avec la CEDEAO qui inclut donc le Nigeria, le Ghana, on dépasse les 200 millions d'habitants. Donc c'est un marché qui est vaste, duquel il n'y a pas beaucoup d'échanges. Il n'y a pas beaucoup d'échanges entre nous. Et je pense qu'aujourd'hui, l'objectif pour nous, en tout cas, c'est de dire on va aller chercher des opportunités. Le Mali doit aller chercher des marchés au Sénégal, doit aller chercher des marchés en Côte d'Ivoire, au Burkina Faso, au Niger, ou même en Algérie à côté, ou en la Mauritanie. Le Mali est un pays qui est entouré de 7 pays. Il y a 7 pays frontaliers. Donc, il y a un hub naturel au centre de l'Afrique de l'Ouest qui nous permet donc d'avoir accès facilement à ces marchés-là. La capitale du Mali, Bamako, est entre 1 heure et 2 heures maximum de toutes les capitales de la sous-région. Ce qui en fait quand même un hub naturel au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Et nous comprenons qu'aujourd'hui, il faut aller ailleurs. C'est pour ça que nos groupes industriels s'exportent très bien aujourd'hui et ont vite compris que, au lieu d'aller, s'il sera plus facile dans une zone économique et monétaire, une zone commune, d'aller vendre mes produits ou les faire produire au Niger à côté, au Bénin ou au Togo, c'est beaucoup plus profitable. Et je pense que là, il y a encore beaucoup à faire. Il y a beaucoup d'opportunités, comme l'a dit Madame, dans ce secteur.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. Je reviendrai à l'un et à l'autre dans quelques instants avant de conclure notre... Yes, would you want to add something, please? Yes.
Sorry. Let me just add, when you talked about the middle class, I think the middle class, I would say, is one that runs anyone getting an average of about $3,000 a year. And that's about, currently, it's about 60 million Africans. And that is... that have about $3,000 a year, and that should be about 100 million by next year. So that shows you the growth of what's happening.
Very large and huge market to address.
Yeah.
Thank you. On va aller vers Ibukun Awozika, qui est CEO de Chair Center Group. Je voudrais commencer par vous demander de nous présenter votre groupe, de nous présenter les activités de votre entreprise.
Thank you very much. The Chair Center Group is a group I started 25 years ago, and we have we have 3 factories running in the furniture sector, and we have a division of the group that's involved with security systems, for the financial industry.
Do you export any part of what you produce?
We export within the region. We've got retail in Ghana, and then from Nigeria itself and from the Ghana retail base, we sell into some of the other countries within the region.
How many employees do you have in your group?
About 200.
200.
Yeah.
And how an entrepreneur, a lady who is an entrepreneur in Africa, can analyze the fast-moving situation of the economy in our emerging countries? What is your opinion about the way our countries are emerging and whole Africa is emerging?
Well, I think your biggest vehicle for the economy of any country will be the entrepreneurs, because first and foremost, as an entrepreneur, you're looking at where the opportunities are, and you don't just look at the opportunities and wonder about it. You have to have the courage to take it on. And to take that opportunity and make something out of it, you have to work with or against in what seems like an ordinary poor environment. Because he's probably a trader or involved in some business, the actual income that he has is not recorded, because a lot of our economies don't collect proper taxes from our people. We're only growing in those segments now. So what I'm trying to say is there are a lot of surprises inherent in the African economies, especially in our country. And the giants or the lions in terms of entrepreneurs or in terms of countries are emerging because the environment is changing. There's something else we also seem to forget. We've talked a lot about the hardcore industries, flour mills, cement. You talk about the Dangotes and all of those. Now, for those industries, it takes much longer. It takes massive capital investment for them to ramp up and become big. But we've got the new economy. With the large youthful population that you have, they're thinking, they're dynamic. Technology is changing the face of business. There are businesses that started in Nigeria, the Congas, or all of these online businesses that are only 2-3 years old, but they already employ hundreds or some over 1,000 people. Their turnover has ramped up so aggressively. They come into one business and they see the other opportunities that are there, and they're able to split up and move into new opportunities. I feel that the real lions of Africa that will emerge will come from a lot of this next generation, because they can grow so quickly. They're well educated. They've been to the best schools in the world. They've worked in some of the global companies. But now they understand where they come from. I was at Harvard Business School.
And they are well connected.
They're globally connected. Yeah. And they have good exposure. I was at Harvard Business School, I think in February. They had their African Business Week or something. And when you listen to the thoughts, the thinking, the knowledge, and the exposure of the next generation of Africans, then you realize that they are equipped to take on the world. And luckily for them, it's a better time. It's a better season. There's better financing. Like in Nigeria, we have better financial institutions. So there's greater opportunity for them. And there's also a lot of venture capital fund that is available to support the growth of businesses that are coming out of Africa to create the next generation of leaders that you're looking for.
Thank you. I would want to ask you, a lot of people from all over the world, and particularly from Europe,
yes,
western part of Europe,
yes,
they feel there is a real growth in Africa. They want to catch it. How can we attract these people to build new models of businesses in our countries? And we know that Africa has a lot of diversity. It's very different from one country to the other, from the west to the east, from north to south, and so on and so on. As we have a lot of competencies, skills, and young people, how can we attract these investors in our countries? What could be your opinion?
In my opinion, any investor or any business person that is looking for an opportunity must have the courage for it. Now, you can't base your opinion...
Even if the business environment is a little bit hostile?
I think that we ourselves undersell ourselves. The hostility that we talk about in most African countries is probably not different from some other parts of the world. And what I have found is, if you get on a flight from London to Nigeria, half the plane is filled with white faces. And this is the honest truth, because there are a lot of expatriates who already do business in Africa.
Yeah, maybe because they have a very deep crisis that they don't know how to do there. So they come to Africa to catch part of the jobs.
First and foremost, I think a lot of people are not diligent in getting the right information about the countries they want to go to. First and foremost, people talk about Africa. Africa is not a village. It's not one country. Sure. It's a continent of about 53 countries. They're different, they're diverse, their culture is different, their approach is different, their economies are different, their opportunities within them are different. If you want to go to any particular country, you need to know what that country is about. You need to understand the nature of that country. I mean, you can't look at, okay, Boko Haram is harassing one segment in the northern part of Nigeria, and there's going to be a briefing that goes out that don't go to Nigeria. I live in Lagos, and that's the center of Nigerian economy. But at the end of the day, CNN or the likes will sell the African countries only in terms of the negative challenges that we have. Now, if the business person decides to make his decision based on a CNN or that kind of news, well, that's that person's problem.
Now we have CNN, but we have also CCTV.
Good. But all I'm saying is...
The Chinese are always giving broadcasting in Africa.
My point
sharing
is...
their values. Sharing the way they look business. Caroline, what do you think about that?
My friend is saying from Nigeria. I think one of the things that has been a negative sale for Africa, except us, apart from ourselves, has been the Western media. And let's be frank. And when you talk about the Chinese media, I was privileged last year when the president of Kenya was going to China, and so I went with him. And the day I arrived, on that evening, I switched on to CCTV, and all I could see was about Kenya. They talked about the parks, they did everything. And I asked a Chinese, when did this begin? And they said for 2 weeks, they'd been running everything about Kenya, promoting Kenya.
Free promotion for Kenya?
Free promotion for Kenya for 2 weeks. And what they had done before the president left, he went to the Masai Mara, which is our largest national park, and he was interviewed and was part of that whole documentary that ran for 2 weeks in China. And I think if the West did that, that would really change the perspective of Africa. Let me read for you a quote from The Economist on a special report on the emergence of Africa. They had this following snapshot that paints a picture at odds with Western images of Africa. They say this, and maybe some of you may have read this. 3 students are hunched over an iPad at a beach cafe on Senegal's Cape Verde Peninsula, the westmost tip of the world's poorest continent. They are reading online news stories about Moldova, one of Europe's most miserable countries. One headline reads, 4 drunken soldiers rape a woman. Another says, Moldovan men have a 19% chance of dying from excessive drinking, and 58% will die from smoking-related diseases. Others deal with sex trafficking. Such stories have become a step of Africa's thriving media, along with austerity tales from Greece. They inspire pity and disbelief, just as tales of disease and disorder in Africa have long done in the rich world. Sitting on the outskirts of Dakar, Senegal's capital, the 3 students sip cappuccinos and look over a paved road shaded by palm trees, where restaurants with white tablecloths serve green-spotted crabs. A local artist is hawking framed pictures of semi-clad peasant girls and a string of colored lights. This is where the slave ships used to depart for the New World. And one of them says, way over there, do they know how much Africa has changed? That is what The Economist had to say.
Monsieur le ministre,
merci.
Je suis un peu provocateur,
Non.
mais il faut bien que nous puissions améliorer les environnements d'investissement pour nos investissements nationaux, mais aussi internationaux.
Je pense que je partage en fait les avis des 2 dames qui sont là sur le plateau avec nous. Cependant, je pense qu'il faut aller au-delà, parce que si nous laissons les autres parler de nous, ils ne seront jamais, en tout cas, ce que nous sommes vraiment. Je pense que là, en Afrique, nous devons être de plus en plus être maîtres de notre propre communication. Et cela veut dire qu'il faut qu'on ait nous-mêmes nos propres outils de communication pour faire savoir au reste du monde quels sont ces success stories que nous avons en Afrique. Il est vrai que des initiatives ont été prises même à partir du Mali, la chaîne panafricaine Africable, qui est présente dans presque une vingtaine de pays et au niveau de la diaspora africaine, permet de véhiculer des messages. Nous avons Africa 24, qui est une chaîne aussi qui est dédiée à l'Afrique. Nous avons Vox Africa. Toutes ces chaînes-là aujourd'hui qui parlent de l'Afrique, qui parlent des Africains, je pense que cela est important parce que nous ne pouvons pas compter sur, je n'oserais pas dire des chaînes ici, qui vont parler de bien de nous ou de mal. On ne va pas leur demander de parler de nous comme nous on veut qu'ils le soient. C'est leur perception. À nous maintenant, premièrement, d'être maîtres de notre communication, donc de dire ce que nous sommes vraiment et de le dire haut et fort et de le transmettre partout où il faut. Cela permettra, je pense, de contrecarrer les crises que nous vivons en Afrique. Je pense que l'histoire que vient de rencontrer Madame à côté reflète vraiment qu'aujourd'hui, on peut présenter un pays. Les caractéristiques de crise que nous vivons en Afrique sont similaires à ce qu'il y a dans d'autres pays dans le monde. Mais ce focus sur l'Afrique, je pense qu'il faudrait qu'on nous-mêmes on prenne en charge. Nous sommes un pays, le Mali, nous sortons de crise, et beaucoup de choses se disent sur notre pays qui sont invraisemblables pour nous, mais tant que nous ne sommes pas en mesure nous-mêmes de le dire et de contrecarrer cette communication-là, on sera toujours en train de nous plaindre de ce que les gens disent sur nous. Donc je pense que vraiment, il faut qu'il y ait un éveil de conscience à notre niveau pour dire, voilà, on tient la communication de l'Afrique, voilà les success stories de l'Afrique.
Please, you want to add something?
To Africa?
Yes.
Well, I think anybody that misses the train of what Africa is right now would have missed forever. The honest truth is, within Africa itself, Africans can prosper just serving our nations when you think of our populations and because we understand our own people. And naturally, as we emerge within our continent, across our countries, working together, the rest of the world cannot but become accessible to us.
Thank you. I'll come back to you, Caroline Kariuki, because it's very interesting to understand. Also, thank you for sharing experience about China, the way you understood how China was interested in your country at that time, but in whole Africa, I should say. China is supposed to lose something like 85 million employments within 10 next years, and part of it will come to Africa. How can we share this wealth and create jobs together? How can we work as African in continental alliances with other parts of the world? How can we have sustainable investment in our countries, in our regions, with all this diversity we have in Africa?
Okay, that's a loaded question, but let me try and answer at least part of it. It's true. If we're going to be able to attract the jobs that are being lost in other regions as they grow and develop in other areas, some of the areas that we need to continue to improve on, one is having a stable macroeconomic policy so that you can stimulate more private and public investment. So that's a very key area. So one of the things that has helped Kenya to grow is having a stable macroeconomic policy, but there's room for improvement, and I think that's an area that all African countries have to continue to look at to be able to attract the jobs that are coming from other regions. The other one is being able to attract the FDI, the foreign development investment, because right now African savings are pretty low, and if we're going to be able to attract those jobs, those investments, we need savings. And so, a lot of the credit from the banks is still very high for most small entrepreneurs to be able to access. So FDI is very important to be able to have the environment that we attract FDI. Then we also need to start moving our consumption driven GDP to our investment export-driven GDP. A lot of what we are seeing in Kenya and most African countries, the GDP growth is being driven by consumption. So it needs to be driven more by investments and exports. So policies around that are very important that we continue to put on. Then social cohesion. It's true, and this is not, even though other parts of the world have had their own social issues, I think there's still many others, still some of the social issues that we're dealing with. I think one of the things that we've been caught up in many of the African countries that was not a reality for a long time is being caught up in the global terrorism. And we have to ensure that we manage that, and so that we don't lose the gains that we have right now. Then when you look at Africa in terms of natural resources, no continent beats Africa in terms of the amount of natural resources and the different types. And so it's important that we have sustainable management of those natural resources, and they become a blessing to African countries. And then continue to exploit ICT and leverage on it to provide growth. So those are some of the areas that I see as Africa, as we continue to grow, as we continue to emerge, that need to be underlying our growth and our development, so that it's sustainable and doesn't come and it's gone in a few years.
Okay, let me maybe talk about one last issue with the three of you. We still have a little bit 10 minutes more in our panel before the closing session with Mr. Lionel Sinzou, who is here, and His Excellency Mohamed Boussaid, the Moroccan Minister of Economy and Finance, who will join us, and Brahim Fassiferi, Chairman of Amadeus Institute, in a few minutes. What could be, in the very next future, the role of the states in our countries to develop and to help really to develop investment and private sector, to let all this energy you were talking about, of youth people, of the talented people, this intelligence you are describing, express themselves? Yes, please. Okay.
Let me say that the first thing that we need to do is to have governments that become mature. Mature in the sense that our governments need to get out of the way of businesses, in a sense, and so that the government becomes more of a facilitator rather than a driver of business. We need to have governments that create the right environment for the private sector to thrive, because I think we have the minds, we have the thoughts, we have the ideas, we have the opportunities, and we have the people to drive it. But the limiting environment makes it impossible for them to move at the level that they should. We also need to have a lot of government-initiated policies that helps to provide the right infrastructure for the private sector to do that. Because at the end of the day, it has to be, the public-private partnership has to be highly enhanced, because it is in that we can have the two minds working together for the development of Africa. The other thing that is critical because of our job situation is for us to have entrepreneurs that become social entrepreneurs, in a sense. I believe that taking a whole new generation of economic entrepreneurs to take on the challenges of Africa in a positive, value-driven way will create engaging, long-lasting change that will change our environment. And the jobs that we need to create can be derived from some of those activities by developing what I call industry champions. African entrepreneurs who are strong in certain segments, who then work with government to develop strategic approach to using those areas of their strength to facilitate growth in terms of job and in terms of the economy. And if I just say something about China, I know that, maybe some countries see China as positive, and maybe in many ways, there's no problem with any investor that is coming into Africa as long as they're bringing the money. But I have a few challenges, and my challenge is, it's good for us to welcome the investors, but we need to articulate what we want from the investment. Mm-hmm. We need to understand that it is not about people investing for investment's sake. If the investment do not create value for our own people, at the end of the day, we actually lose more. A situation where a Chinese company will come into Africa or any African country, make an investment that 80% of the value stays with the Chinese is actually a loss to Africa, it's not a gain. A situation where you take a job, you need 5,000 people, and you bring 4,000 Chinese on a ship. And even if you employ 1,000 locals, we've lost because you're using the resources of that country to create value for another country. So there are a lot of the immaturity of some of our governments is actually turning what could be positive into what is negative. The Chinese have no obligation to us. They want what they want and they take what they want. And they are not at the maturity of the Western countries, so they don't have a heart where that is concerned. There's no heart condition, they're not compassionate about it. They want something, they don't care if you're foolish enough to give it to them, they take it. But what Africa needs to be doing is positive engagement in terms of the FDIs that will then create value for our country and for our people.
Thank you very much. Oh, yes, please, Caroline. You can give us your opinion about what could be the role of the state in our countries that make investment more happy and make investors come very easier. And then the last words could be given by Mr. Mbaka, please.
Okay, I'll just add what my colleague has said. I think one of the major roles for government, and which is what she has said, facilitation. For Africa, it means integration. I think we need to integrate much more, and I think it's only governments, because people are already integrating, people are moving and doing business, but the barriers to trade, it's the governments that need to sit down and break those barriers, both tariff and non-tariff barriers. The second area that governments need to invest heavily on in terms so that they can facilitate business is infrastructure, whatever infrastructure, because once business has infrastructure, business will do what business does and to provide the wealth and the jobs. Thirdly is the social development. If governments spend on health and education and not leave that burden to private sector like we've seen in many countries, including my own country, where a lot of the health sector and the education sector, the burden is starting to lay heavily on private sector. If government can spend more on those sectors that are not naturally business sectors, then I think business will be able to do what business does. So those are some of the three areas that I would like to add.
Thank you. On va faire la conclusion avec vous, si vous le voulez bien, Moustapha Ben Barka.
Merci.
Sur ces questions du rôle de l'État pour faciliter encore plus le développement du secteur privé et favoriser encore plus les investissements.
Merci beaucoup. Juste pour reprendre les propos de Madame qui disait tout à l'heure qu'on ne doit pas rater le développement, le train de l'Afrique. Et je pense que le drame de l'Afrique et ce qu'on peut se redouter, c'est que là, les Africains eux-mêmes ratent ce train de l'Afrique. Cela, pourquoi? À cause de cette croissance que nous avons. Les investisseurs n'ont peur de rien. Je pense que quand quelqu'un a envie de rentabilité, il est prêt à prendre des risques. Il y a des pays en Afrique qui sont en crise, qui sont en guerre. Les investisseurs viennent. Sauf que cette croissance qu'on a au Mali, par exemple, nous au Mali, on prévoit 6,1% pour 2014 et plus de 7% à partir de 2017. Comment nous allons nous assurer que tout le monde profite de cette croissance-là? Et je pense que le rôle des États, c'est cela. Nous allons toujours avoir des taux de croissance qui sont élevés, mais tant que nous ne pouvons pas nous assurer que tout le monde profite, que cette richesse générée profite à la large, à la population de façon générale, et là, cela va requérir donc des dirigeants, des leaders que nous avons dans nos pays, une vision qui est partagée, une vision qui permette en tout cas de s'assurer que tout le monde profite de cette croissance-là, avoir une gouvernance politique qui est une bonne gouvernance politique, mais également une bonne gouvernance économique. Et ce n'est pas pour jeter des fleurs au Maroc. Je pense qu'aujourd'hui, on a vu au cours des 30 dernières années, l'ascension du Maroc à différents niveaux. Comment est-ce qu'une des croissances aujourd'hui, je pense, et si je peux me permettre, est l'une des plus partagées par la population? Parce qu'elle profite à tout le monde, parce que tout le monde profite de cela. Et je pense qu'aujourd'hui, demain, l'Afrique, c'est cela. Demain, il y aura des investisseurs dans les mines au Mali. On a beaucoup d'investisseurs qui sont là, peu importe la tendance de la situation politique, les investisseurs dans les mines sont là. Mais est-ce qu'elles profitent vraiment à tout le monde? Je pense que c'est ça vraiment le rôle aujourd'hui des États. Le secteur privé, nous avons en Afrique tous compris que c'est le vecteur de la croissance. On a tous compris qu'effectivement, c'est à travers eux qu'on va développer nos économies. Mais je pense qu'aujourd'hui, la vision et le leadership, et les leaders en fait en place, doivent avoir une vision qui puisse permettre d'inclure tout le monde dans cette croissance-là. Et à mon avis,
n'oublions pas que pour les investisseurs, investir dans les ressources sous différentes formes, sont toujours des logiques d'investissement de très long terme.
Très long terme, voilà.
Quand vous parlez des mines, par exemple, il faut faire de la recherche pendant des années avant d'arriver à avoir un vrai rendement, etc., etc. Donc, évidemment, ces investisseurs dépassent les conjonctures. Ils regardent les tendances. Mais par contre, la réaction de notre invité du Nigeria, elle nous disait que certains des gouvernements en Afrique étaient immatures, politiquement très corrects, et nécessitaient une prise de conscience de l'intérêt d'impacter sur les populations très vite. Merci beaucoup. Je voudrais demander à ce qu'on applaudisse l'ensemble de nos trois intervenants pour cette table ronde sur les nouveaux lions africains. Je voudrais vous remercier encore. Merci beaucoup de votre contribution. Thank you. Je vous laisse aller retourner dans la salle.